an entire industry. So I think from a production perspective, luckily, I think the second wave it's far better. People are back on factories, but now this supply chain chip issue is turning out to be a problem.
No, we I think in Munich the first plant is standing this week due to that. So we do not produce at the moment this week in Munich.
Wow.
A very good afternoon, Nitin, Tejpreet, and all the esteemed speakers who joined us on this panel today. I would like to, all our speakers are here. I'd like to request Nitin to please start this session. Over to you, Nitin.
Well, thanks very much, everybody, and I was actually really enjoying listening to the conversation, you know, and the challenges from the global supply chain side of the house. So firstly, a really warm welcome to my esteemed panelists. This is you know, set up to be an extremely exciting session, and I'm really looking forward to listening and from hearing from all of you. You know, as I was listening to your conversation, and for those of us who just sort of come back and joined us online, I thought it was really interesting that we were talking through global supply chains and the implications of you know, one part of the supply chain on the other. And I think in this context, you know, one of the things that it does sort of stand out is the implications of sustainability, air pollution, and some of the choices that are made in one part of the supply chain, or one part in one country, or one part of the sector and industry, and the implications that has on all the other companies and sectors, you know, as we go further down the stream. Which I think is why it's really important that, you know, whatever we come back and do as companies and as in collaboration and forums like this, has to be a setting up of all of us working together to bring the whole sector, the whole industry, and everybody sort of to come forward. Because if it's only one part of us that comes in, then effectively we break chains, and we create inconsistencies and discontinuities that create more problems as we go forward. So the India CEO Forum for Clean Air is a forum that I have the pleasure of chairing with my really good friend TP over there, and together we've been championing this for a few years, and it's a forum that we set out an 8-point agenda to come back and try and deliver this type of change on behalf of sort of industries, and how we can collaborate with the government to take this forward. And I've been really pleased that we've been able to get 54 businesses on board and signed up to the charter that we had put forward. We're really keen to come back and expand that and take that forward, and as well as start to develop some of the guidances and some of the advice and some of the materials that we feel that other industries are going to need, and other sectors and other companies need to know and understand as to how they can start to handle some of these problems and challenges going forward. The forum itself has had a couple of conferences, and you know, we've had the pleasure of hosting some of those conferences, and they were, I think, a really good start of a conversation about what each of us is sort of coming and doing in parts. And the recognition that you know, I take away from forums such as this, but also other sort of forums, is that there is a lot of really good work happening. That there is a lot of really good ideas that many of us are working tremendously hard to come back and address the challenge of air quality and air pollution. But that also, we also need to find ways to scale and replicate and copy and learn and to be able to take that forward and take it across a range of different companies as we go forward. Ultimately, you know, across, you know, the cities, I happened to be in a panel with Mr. Godrej yesterday, and I think he made a fascinating sort of comment, and the way I think he phrased it for us was saying, you know, we have the infamous or the dubious reputation now of having some of the most polluted cities in the world, and many of us, you know, in the country, that's just simply an unacceptable thing for us to sort of come back and talk about. That we would have the again, the dubious reputation of having some of the most polluted cities from an air pollution point of view, and it is unacceptable, and it is things that we need to sort of come back and work on. We do have ideas. There's, one of the ideas that has been germinated by the CII and CMA and team and done a fantastic job with as a flagship program is the crop residue management program. And it's been wonderful to sort of come back and see that, when in a targeted intervention with farmers on crop burning, that 90% of the farmers across 60,000 hectares were able to come back and choose an alternative rather than burning their crop. From my experience, I've actually spent time with farmers, just having discussions with them, and I thought it was a very fascinating conversation. And as we're driving by fields that were being burnt, and I had my sort of pollution mask on, and I asked the individual I was with, and you see this pollution, and he said, we understand that, and in fact, let me tell you the statistic: 60% of the people in my village are suffering from respiratory issues, and so he was conscious and aware of the implications of all of that burning that was going on around them. The whole village was. But equally, he came back and said, what do we do about it, right? It's easy for you to point to this and say that that's a problem. And it's a problem for you in Delhi, but it's a bigger problem for me here with my children and my family. But we need to have answers and we need to have solutions. And I think the work that CII has done is giving some of these answers to the farmers. And now we need to get it to a point where it is being able to take it away from a CSR and a supported structure, but make it more economical on its own sort of legs to take it forward. There are other solutions and things that we are pursuing through the CII platform that we have created as CEOs. Some of them, of course, are linked in with other sort of climate change and energy transition challenges, such as zero emission vehicles, clean fuel solutions, alternatives for industry from coal burning to other sort of sources for their basic sort of energy type requirements. One of the things that CII has done is partnered with NITI Aayog, and this is where I would be really honored and I'm very pleased that and I hope I'm not sure I see him online, but I hope there you are, Mr. Avinash Mishra is here as advisor for NITI Aayog at this panel, because this is a great work that NITI Aayog has been a tremendous champion and partner, and we have been working. CII has worked very closely to come back and publish some of the ideas and thoughts that's there, and things that we can come back and share across not only parts and different regions, but it sets out a clear direction and agenda in terms of how we can come and take this forward. So without much further ado, let me invite Mr. Avinash Mishra to come in and share his keynote address and talk a little bit about how NITI Aayog has been leading some of the work on air pollution.
Nitin, really sorry, but unfortunately, Mr. Avinash Mishra is basically in another meeting, and that meeting is being stretched. So he will hopefully join us in 10 minutes time. Okay, all right. Sorry, I thought I saw him flash on the screen. That's my mistake. Well, then I think then why don't we do this? I think I actually am quite would really love to now actually hear from the panel and maybe take it forward from there. So maybe why don't we begin with the sequence that I have sort of in front of me over there, and maybe TP, I'd like to sort of begin with you if I can, and to capture your sort of thoughts on how do you see this particular challenge that's in front of us, and specifically you run a great organization, you do tremendous sort of work in this space itself, and so what do you think are the imperatives for business and how should businesses think about this challenge?
Hi, Nitin. Good to see you again, and good to see everybody on the panel. And thanks a lot for inviting me, CII, to be part of this very, very important subject and topic. I think, Nitin, there's no doubt. I think you put it out really, really well in laying out the framework of what the challenge is. And it's a huge challenge in front of us. As both of us know, the CII and the Clean Air Fund did a big study, and with a consulting firm called Dahlberg, and the results that came out of that study was quite dramatic. And I thought I'll just quickly share with everybody on this panel right now some of the incredible numbers that came out, which really hits the point home. What we found in that study was just a 5-point increase. A 5-point increase in PM 2.5 was resulting in close to 1.1% impact on the GDP in India. And just air pollution itself in India impacts it close to about $95 billion every year, which is about 3% of GDP. And what the study showed was it could actually increase to 8.5% of GDP by 2025, the impact of air pollution. What we're also seeing right now is that the air pollution could cost Indian businesses the cost equivalent of 50% of the cost of what it cost us to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. And you can imagine the impact it's going to have on industry year after year. And even when you look at the service industry, of which all of us know is a huge, it contributes about 8% of Indian GDP. And even the service sector, what we are finding is that we are seeing 60% of losses due to productivity gains, 11% due to absenteeism, etc. So I think that hopefully lays out the context of the challenges we see across the industry that air pollution will have. But I think the positive takeaway, Nitin, that I see is that, like you were saying, there is a conscious effort within industries and government in our country that it's time to do something about it. And it's fascinating to see the creative and innovative steps that the government and the private sector is now taking to sort of take an impact, to take action on this. The United States EPA actually did a study that actually said that every dollar that they spend on air pollution can actually impact a positive impact on the US economy of $30. And if all of us agree that there is that obvious positive multiplier effect, then I really think we should all put our brains together to do something about it. So what are the solutions? And I think, Nitin, a few things that I'll just say is that I'll just share before I turn it over back to you. One is I think we need a holistic approach. It can't be just one little area that we need to look at. It has to be a holistic approach, whether it's in terms of mobility, and I see Michael out here, and I'm sure Michael will talk about the innovation and disruption happening in the automotive sector to take into account with two-wheelers, three-wheelers, electric vehicles coming in right now. Two is this whole fantastic push on ethanol and biofuels that the government of India is pushing to really drive clean energy, or clean air is fabulous. I also see this big energy transition happening in the energy world, whether it's the way we're looking at hydrogen, storage, natural gas, and a lot of other areas of this energy transition that's happening. Obviously, renewables is right bang and center for the last at least 10 years in our country. So I just stop out there, Nitin. I think it's fantastic to see the efforts that have been made in our country, and even globally, the awareness that's happening. I think now the question is, how do we really take it to the next level and scale it across industries?
Thanks, TP, and thank you very much for capturing that. And actually, I think that's actually a great plug-in, because we do have our keynote speaker now. Mr. Mishra has kindly joined us now. Mr. Mishra, we had opened between TP and myself and laid out the landscape and also expressed the appreciation for the work that CII does in partnership with Niti Aayog. And Niti Aayog has certainly been a champion on air pollution and also of sharing across industries and sectors some of the solutions that TP actually just outlined and talked about. I'd like to really invite you now for your keynote address to share with us, how does Niti Aayog think about this challenge, and what are some of the things that we collectively as individuals or businesses can do to work with Niti Aayog to address some of these challenges.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all. And before I initiate the discussion, I would like to really congratulate on such a topic for the discussion, because you see, we are feeling in India in general, in particular, and in world across, the impact of the airborne pollution which is happening, and which is a difference we can see in the pre-pandemic scenario and during the pandemic and thereafter. We could realize that the impact what the air pollution is playing on various activities of the various countries globally. We generally don't consider non-tangible and invisible threats which we are getting through and life threatening. This is what it is happening in case of air pollution. But the recent report by the Energy Policy Institute of the University of Chicago states that air pollution may reduce life expectancy of Indians and by around 9 years on an average. So this is something which is very serious and which needs to be addressed. Toxic air is not only a massive health and environment concern, but also takes a huge economic toll. It impedes with the development aspect of the economic development, what Mr. Chopra has rightly said before I joined actually. The overall economic cost of pollution is estimated at around 7% of GDP, which is around 14 lakh crore. So this much the serious impact is there because the person is suffering, he is unable to really put the economic activity, and that impact is there. In 2019, 1.7 million deaths were related to air pollution, which is 18% of the total deaths in the country. So this is the serious thing what we need to really see and address. The 2019 World Air Quality Report said that India ranked 5th out of 98 countries for the average atmospheric PM 2.5 concentration. So rather we are to say that we are in alarming situation. There are 21 of world's 30 cities with the worst air pollution in India. So certainly this is a cause of concern. I have really raised a lot of problem statement, but what is expected? There is much more expected from the industry side. What is expected? There are the industrial activities. The emission is happening in the industries. How to control the emission? Also, is in the mobility sector, in the transport sector, the introduction of the lithium-ion battery-based vehicles might have reduced a lot, but I feel lithium-ion battery perhaps will not be the ultimate, because it will again depend on the rare earth to get and to move it. So we need to move to other sectors. Of course, Mr. Chopra has mentioned that there should be biofuel-based transportation or blending of ethanol with the fossil fuel has been done, but it is only mitigating. But we need to adopt. So certainly the hydrogen base, we are working a lot in case of the developing the hydrogen economy, and that too particularly green hydrogen. So green hydrogen, ACC battery storage, there all these things are required. There are certain other products, those are generating, like the waste treatment, which is this is not happening properly in India. So the waste treatment and circular economy, which is the part of the my waste or one particular waste could be the fuel for something. So that all need to be done. I think that is there. So the pollution which in India we are facing from basically air pollution is coming from industries, is coming from transportation, and thirdly from agriculture. Now in case of agriculture practices, we require to introduce lot much technology, and not only technology, but how to use that particular husk and how to use that particular stubble for making use. There are a lot of other activities which are taking place and may not be economical today, but with the technological impacts, it will be there. There are many products, those are coming up, like the manufacturing of board and manufacturing of the plastic replacing the plates, cutleries, all that could come up. So certainly the industry innovation and the effort is required in these areas. I will say IKEA, which launched a collection 2019 that used the rice straw as a raw material. So this sort of the industrial interventions also required, and even in case of the humans, those are making the diesel generating set, that is also to a great extent reducing the PM 2.5 concentration level. So technology is also required to address all these things. And now the India is in an innovation mode. Many startups are coming. We are promoting all those startups. We are also promoting the plastic alternates. We have devised the model concession agreement. I mean to say the government of India is leveraging to develop the model concession agreement that will treat the solid waste management, segregation at source, the liquid waste management, reuse, recycle of the wastewater. All this will be there. And I hope that my industrial partners will come forward and move forward. So this PM 2.5 concentration, which is seriously impacting to all our bodies, the people living in Delhi are losing on an average 9 years of their life. That is something very serious. If I am living in somewhere in the US or in Switzerland, I might be adding that much life to my the total years. So that is a really serious threat, and it is to be taken care. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you again, Mr.
Yes, sir,
Mishra.
you're audible now.
I'm sorry. It seems as if I got disconnected for some time, but I hope that I have concluded. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much for your helping and championing the way forward. I think we would all agree with your observations as you know what we need to come back, what we need to do. But maybe one of the things that we haven't spoken about, and this is maybe where I'd like to first bring in Ms. Neera from as a director from the Fair Climate Fund, and then maybe followed up with from Siddhartha, Mr. Vermani from APIC India, is the role of markets and carbon markets. And maybe Neera, if I may just begin with you, would you happen to have any examples or any thoughts on where markets have been particularly effective in in dealing with the challenges of perhaps some other issue, but may have a co-benefit on air pollution? Please, over to you.
Thank you, Nitin, for this nice question, and thank you for being here and in being invited. Fair Climate Fund works with CII, and the example I would like to give is indeed in the reduced residue burning in the Punjab and Haryana area, where you actually by investing in changing farming behaviors, you reduce the air pollution, but you also have a benefit on climate change. So your carbon emission is less. And indeed, like you say, if the income of these carbon credit sales would have a pricing and companies could contribute to that, then you would have a sort of revolving mechanism to also give the farmers a payment to take the effort not to burn the straws, because that is apparently the easiest way to get rid of the straws, but to reuse it in mulch and reuse it in agriculture. So the carbon markets bring tremendous opportunity to have a sort of opportunity cost for doing something else and earn something. And the CII project in Haryana, Punjab is a great example for that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Maybe actually on that, maybe we can go to Mr. Vermani, and maybe you could tell us a little bit. I mean, I believe that you and APIC India have been looking at emission trading schemes and as market mechanisms. And can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges in trying to create that structure and to scale and take that forward?
Yeah, thank you. And before I start, I would also like to thank Shri Avinash Mishra for quoting EPIC's research right in the beginning of his keynote. In fact, it was there all over the global press as well as in the Indian press yesterday when we sort of talked about the Air Quality Life Index. It's a tool that we have developed And the tool basically, one of the key things that we always, as experts and scientists and technology people, we always try to convey things in the jargon, which is understandable to us. But what we thought was that what's the best way to convey to the people that what do you lose as a result of this pollution? How do we sort of simplify this? So the AQLI is a tool that that does that, and it was all over press yesterday. And on an average, a citizen in Delhi is losing 9 years of its life, by breathing foul air. So that's a problem. And in terms of the solutions, the emissions trading scheme, as what you rightly said, Nitin, I mean, I don't know how much time we have, and there are some new faces on this panel, and if we have some time, I can sort of spend 6 to 7 minutes taking everyone through the slides of our emission trading work, and perhaps then we can even discuss some of the challenges that sort of we are facing, and of course some of the new positive developments which have happened just in a matter of last 3 or 4 months.
Sure.
Those are also things that we can then discuss.
Well, I think Mr. Virmani, because I'd still like to hear from Michael and from Tarun also. So maybe in the interest you could give us the key sort of 2 or 3 insights that are there, and then I'm sure we can circulate the details on the scheme and all a little bit later on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean that basically our theory of change is that a market-based method can provide far greater potential to be effective in reducing emissions than these typical command and control systems which exist as on today. And basically we've seen that in the current system, what we have in terms of all types of factories, whether they are large, whether they're small, whether they operate 6 hours a day, whether they operate 24 hours a day, everyone has a fixed pollution target, and that's something which leads to a fairly high compliance cost, in all types of factories. So I mean that what we are really proposing is, an emissions trading scheme where a regulator decides on how much pollution in aggregate should be emitted by a group of plants, and then it sets a number of permits which are denominated in sort of tons of particulate matter, and then the total value of the permit is basically equal to that cap. And those permits are then distributed or auctioned across to the plants. And then these plants are then freely able to sell and buy these permits at the end of a compliance period. And then finally, the ownership of these permits is basically determined by these trades, and these trades are made on a commodity exchange. So I mean that just because there is a limited number of permits, it ensures that the total emissions are equal to a predetermined cap. So we actually, EPIC along with its partners, did this experiment for over 5 to 6 years in Gujarat, in Surat, in an industrial cluster where color dyeing was one of the key polluting industry, and we sort of involved 350 plants in that area. And I mean that in sum, basically what we saw is that over a period of the study period of 2 to 3 years, we actually saw that between the control and treatment group, that Surat ETS actually cut pollution by almost 20%. So I mean, there were definitely challenges, as you would have already heard. I said that it took us like maybe 5 to 6 years to sort of put that together. However, on the positive side, we've also seen there is a lot of traction in ETS. We are in very active discussions with the MUFCC. Very recently, in June this year itself, the government of Punjab, along with EPIC India and its partners, have actually launched its own emission trading scheme, along with the Punjab Pollution Control Board, for basically the dyeing units in the city of Ludhiana. So basically, we are providing technical assistance and capacity building. So it's like a fairly recent development, and the government of Punjab has also taken the initiative of sending their key decision makers and policy makers to Surat at their expense to go and study that how did the Surat experiment work in the first place. So I mean that there are, I mean that as you rightly said, I mean that there are challenges, there are some slow movements. I think COVID has disrupted a lot of the speed of implementation, but we are seeing some amount of positive traction in the last 3 to 4 months on this front. So I even sort of over to the group now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rami. Michael, let me actually bring you into this conversation, and you know, a number of us as speakers have sort of mentioned the transition in the mobility sector. Mr. Vermani's of course talked very much about the industrial side and some of the things that can be done there. But you know, as in terms of leading the transition and as part of the BMW group, how do you see some of the changes that are coming in the demand for lower emission or almost zero emission sort of vehicles? Yeah, and specifically also, if you could comment on, you know, a couple of people have alluded to that, you know, the biofuels is potentially an opportunity. You know, to actually come and you be able to use some of the crops that you know previously would be burnt, and be able to actually come back and make that, you know, use that in vehicles. But over to you. How do you see that?
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And first of all, I would say that the sustainability aspect has become a core topic in our strategy. So the aim is not to do sustainability in transport. It's actually to make our business sustainable. And what does that mean? That means for us that we set a hard target, clear target that we can be tested to for 2030. So for example, we look not only at the vehicle use phase, but also at the production and also at the supply chain. So we work together with our suppliers to lower the impact of our products. So if you take, for example, the supply chain, that makes up to 30% of the CO2 emissions of our product, and approximately 70% are in the use phase. So that means burning fuel. So there you can see that if you use alternative fuels as a transitional topic method, you can support the lowering the CO2. However, for us, the path is clearly in the next 10 years, the e-mobility and the electrification of mobility. So I think, especially if you look at air pollution and CO2 together, electrification enables you to bring out the emissions out of the city there where the mobility is happening. So by 2025, we will have 25 electrified vehicles. And by 2030, 50% of the sold vehicles will be electrical cars as BEVs. So the holistic approach is not only going into the use phase where you can substitute the fuel by either biofuel, hydrogen, or electricity, depending on the local needs. It's especially also the supply chain where you have actually 3 materials that are responsible for 70% of the CO2 footprint. It's basically the battery, the steel, and the aluminum components of it. And what we do, for example, is that we work together with our suppliers to ensure that they use only renewable energy for the production of components. So for battery cells, but also for aluminum foundries. And the other aspect that was already discussed before is the circular economy. So we think that it's a very important aspect that we reuse as much material as possible in the vehicles, and we've set our target for the vehicles coming from 2025 on to have 50% recyclable material in new cars. So it's not only looking at how does the car drive itself, it's the overall environment of the business. So with the supply chain, the production, where we use only green power, and the use phase. And there I come to the participation of transport. I think electrification is the next big step towards sustainable and less pollutive mobility. And therefore you need a good environment for new solutions to thrive. So you need what we call level playing field for new solutions. So for electrical mobility, for example. So you need that works at sometimes often it works in many countries with subsidies that need to run out at some point when the technology has reached parity with existing technologies. But this kickstarting effort part is necessary to get electric mobility started. It's not only the vehicles, it's also the energy infrastructure. So it's make green power available for green energy, for charging. So you need charging infrastructure, and that charging infrastructure needs to have green power, green electricity. And also then on the other side, because it's not only getting the green power to the vehicle, it's also producing the green power, you need a higher increase and integration of renewable energies into the energy markets. You need to consider the whole chain. And what is also very important from our point of view is to make sure that the regulatory framework is kind of a roadmap. So say we have this national goal in 2030 or in 2035, whenever it's suitable for the market, but that as a business, and it's not only transport, it's the manufacturing, it's creating of new products. You have a kind of a vision, a common goal where you will go to, and you can rely on the regulation to follow that. So I think the transport can play a big role. I think I'm convinced electromobility is at the edge of getting compatible in many markets, but you need the environment around it to push that. So somebody chooses electric mobility compared to fossil mobility to reach this objective.
Thanks very much, Michael. I have my own interesting story in trying to get an electric vehicle in India, and then doing my best to actually come back and offset the electricity from coal-based, but I fully agree with you, that it's not easy to come and think through the whole life cycle of what you're actually doing to really get it into a zero emission space. But let me bring in Tarun now, and Tarun, the often answer that everyone says is that the startups and the entrepreneurs are going to solve all these problems for us. But maybe you can tell us, from your perspective, how is some of the an enterprise like yours, how in terms of utilization of some of the crop residue, what are some of the challenges you face, and what are some of the opportunities that some of the initiatives like the CII Cleaner Air, Better Life Forum, how can it help and enable you?
Well, thank you so much, Nitin, and thank you all. Super glad to be here, and I apologize in advance. You might hear peacocks around, so in case they do, just enjoy the sound. I'm actually pretty thankful to the IDEA Forum and as well as the efforts put in by the Center of Excellence in creating these recommendations as well as the financial modeling, and that was presented to NITI Aayog as possible solutions to crop residue burning. But a little background about what we do is we essentially use crop residues like paddy straw, wheat straw, bagasse, cotton stalk, corn stover. It's a long list of crop residues that we essentially use to create bricks and blocks that essentially help cut cost of construction by up to 50%, and also improve the energy efficiency of the building by another 25% as compared to the baseline, which is your regular clay bricks. There's actually something very interesting that happens in the industry, especially when it comes to construction. I mean, it's a commonly known fact that buildings essentially are responsible for almost 45% of global carbon emissions, 39% because of the space conditioning of buildings, and another 8 odd percent essentially because of the manufacturing of building materials, cement, and all of those combined. So and as Nitin, you've been talking about how your trip to the villages and how 60% of the population had some kind of lung disorder, and that's very true, not only for agricultural residue burning, but also because of brick manufacturing. What's actually very, very surprising is that 3% of these emissions essentially always go unaccounted for because no one really knows how to measure the emissions coming from brick manufacturing. And there were quite a few interesting studies by a couple of IITs in terms of how bricks contribute to emissions. And when you basically do that correlation, right? So that they did an LCS study on brick manufacturing, and then when you actually go back to the numbers and see how many bricks are produced in this country and are consumed, that's like 3% of our national carbon emissions, and it just it's mind-boggling. So to actually overcome all of these troubles, what we need are negative emissions technologies. I mean, the climate change is a much bigger pandemic than air pollution, hands down. I don't think there's anyone going to be debating it, and I think it's super important for us to actually target the bigger problem to actually achieve the side effect, which is air pollution. And to overcome those issues is why we need negative emissions technologies. And what is super interesting is, even though the construction in basically buildings are responsible for like the largest chunk of anthropogenic climate change, it's in fact the industry which actually also has a solution. Like, if we were to really pool our resources together and look at current day immediately available technologies and rapidly scale them, we're talking about reducing almost 40% of all the global carbon emissions. And then you factor in negative emissions technologies such as what we create in the name of Agri-Free. We're literally, we've already reached the 50% ballpark. And what's even more interesting is that for us, while I was developing the product, while I was actually trying to introduce the solution, there were quite a few opportunities. Some people spoke about, so some of the studies that I conducted were in terms of carbon capture, which wasn't very viable, which had a lot of technological constraints. And then there were a few other methods and means that I was looking at. And finally, when I actually looked at crop residue, you're literally talking about a waste, a mass that is essentially already captured CO2 from the atmosphere and just lying there, right? And that's the whole reason why people want to use biomass for fuel, right? Because you're not creating fresh emissions by utilizing crop residues. And I was like, okay, what if I don't burn it? And what if I actually start making a value-added product that can essentially, make a building that does not have such a huge carbon footprint? So that's essentially what we are doing at this point. And basically, Cleaner Air, Better Life. I'm super thankful again. Last few words. But actually super thankful to the CEO Forum for actually providing the strategic support to entrepreneurs and enterprises such as ours working on biomass management. And I'm also super excited about partnering with the knowledge platform, CII Knowledge Platform, to train others entrepreneurs and partners to essentially start up or bring in these kind of negative emissions technologies to the industry. And I'm really looking forward to the technology pilots that we're going to be doing in the next few days to demonstrate these solutions. Thank you. Over to you, Nathan.
Right. Thanks very much, Tan. Actually, maybe on that note, if you could, maybe Neera, if I could bring you back into the conversation, and how do businesses and entrepreneurs and individuals work with organizations like yourself and the Fair Climate Fund and similar organizations to come in and actually be able to take some of this forward and come back and actually scale and deliver some of the solutions?
Yeah, thank you, Nitin. It's great to hear your stories and the efforts you're doing in the automotive industry and everywhere in the energy sector. And we in the Netherlands, we work with entrepreneurs willing to do something very concisely about climate change and their own carbon footprint. So just a little bit of background from what Fair Climate Fund does. We are a social enterprise based in the Netherlands, but part of a development corporation working on poverty alleviation and on making markets more inclusive and more fair, and notably the voluntary carbon markets. So what do? We actually work together with private sector partners, larger buyers of carbon offsets, carbon credits, willing to engage with us in projects that really bring benefits to the people that have the largest impact of climate change. Because the carbon markets are not really inclusive. It's also a trading and wheeling and dealing sometimes. And of course, we promote also reduction of carbon emission, but we also promote a fair mechanism to reward the people that have the huge impact of climate change on their everyday life. And meanwhile, and that is the nice part of this seminar, also improving air quality. So what do we do being a social enterprise with this aim is we invest in climate projects, notably in India. We have a local office, and Yasmeet Singh is our director. He's also present in this forum. And we are developing projects in India that also capture carbon, but that also bring other benefits to the rural people mostly. And that is the nice example that we do with CII. So those projects have multiple benefits. They not only capture carbon, but they also bring health impacts because the air pollution is reduced. And to give some overall examples, we have some big projects in India on cleaner cooking. So we invest in cleaner cooking devices together with our private sector partners to bring clean cooking at household level for households that cannot afford to buy one themselves. Because the market mechanism works that normally households pay, but a lot of households can't pay. That's our experience in India also. So we have clean cooking projects we develop in Mumbai area, in the slums, in Raichur, in rural areas mostly, and also in biogas, where you have carbon reductions that we sell to entrepreneurs willing to reduce their carbon footprint cost effectively and contributing to these households directly. And that is the nice part also about this agricultural project, where you also have farmers. So we do also invest in in projects that reduce carbon emission by preventing rice straw burning, improving the air quality. So the similar system works in the Haryana Punjab area, where we also collaborate with CII to bring carbon finance to the farmers, because there the need is really the biggest. So we do work with entrepreneurs like you, and we would love to have a sort of quality credit, including the health component. The SDG 3 is mainly there, but we also bring time saving. But SDG 3 is really on improving health for the rural people. And I just heard about the people suffering in the areas, not only in Delhi, but also in the rural areas where the rice straw is burned. So it is a problem of everyone. So we should sort of stick together, private sector, also the rural communities, to finance those interventions that bring benefits to the rural life, the people in the rural settings that cannot afford to do it themselves. I think Nitin, you saying that they don't know another option than to burn the straw. But that's why maybe development should take place, that you can use the straws indeed for biomass fuel or for other options. And we should sort of invest in that, because those farmers cannot do that on their own. So we use the carbon market and the carbon credit sales to also channel funds to the farmers and the poor communities to do those investments, because they cannot pay it on their own behalf. And that is a bit of a context why we work with CII in this great project, where you have a transfer of working in the agricultural space. I'm an agriculturalist by background, and I really like to see the benefits of the carbon markets going to the farmers as well, and not only to the trading. I mean, I just want to emphasize that the carbon credit markets are not inclusive at this moment. The money doesn't go to the people that produce the carbon reductions. And that, I think, should be very clear. I mean, carbon credits alone are not sufficient to cover your own footprint. you should ask always the question, who is getting the income of this carbon credit purchase from my company? So that I leave to you as a challenge. If you want to engage in any impact bond, carbon credit, or health impact credit, please ask where the money goes and make it transparent. Let them explain you where the money goes. Thank you, Nitin, for this opportunity to explain a bit more about what we do.
No, thank you very much, Neera. Actually, maybe if we could just take 5 more minutes, and I'll try and go through. But TP, I wanted to bring you into this one because in the spirit of what Neera was talking about of transparency, right? And I thought it was really interesting. If you recall the work that we saw on the economic impact on air pollution, and I guess I wanted to ask you, do you think businesses in India are, fully aware and do they understand the economic impacts of some of these choices? And like Neera suggesting, right, that do they even appreciate, where some of the carbon markets are or where some of the money is and who's making money? What do you think? Are we ready for this?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that, Nitin and Neera. Fabulous points, really, for all of us who are coming from an energy world. I think whatever you said was absolutely spot on. And I didn't even realize that it's great to hear that what you guys are doing is taking the carbon markets and getting it to the person right at the bottom of the food chain. And that's super, super to hear, because I completely agree with you. I'm one of the beneficiaries of carbon credits from our wind farms. We get those carbon credits, but I really agree that if we can spread it out even more widely down to the bottom layer, that's a fabulous initiative. I think, Nitin, to your point, let me just share about 3 or 4 key points. One is, I think Indian companies and global companies get it. I think finally large corporations are getting it, but there are a couple of challenges, and I'll sort of share some of those with you. One is, I think I tell everybody, Nitin, that air pollution, sustainability, net zero emissions, climate change are all part of the same coin, right? They're all interlinked, and we need to look at everything, like I keep saying. One of our companies, Industry.ai, provides AI and IoT technologies to drive productivity in manufacturing. But while a lot of companies come to us to say, listen, can we digitize production lines and drive productivity in manufacturing? One of the key interest levels from companies is our product for sustainability, where we are seeing in industries, especially certain energy intensive industries, fertilizers, cement, chemicals, oil and gas, where energy component of their cost is such a high component that even a couple of % of energy savings using AI can have a huge impact on the bottom line and drive down greenhouse gas emissions. So the first step is people are aware of these issues. People are beginning to measure greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a big positive impact. And we're seeing a huge demand for people for these technologies to drive down greenhouse gas emissions. 2, but one of the big challenges, Nitin, is the fact that across the world, there are no standard levels or standards. In the real estate space, you have WELL, GRESB, LEED. So you have a couple of these, but there's no standards in the world of industry, especially. There is no standards for chemical industry, oil and gas, auto. How do you manage or how do you measure greenhouse gas emissions across industries? And I think that's something the world community needs to come together to sort of figure out. 3, something to the point that Neera also mentioned about financing challenges. This entire energy transition requires capital, and capital needs a fair return. And that's going to be another big challenge for all of us in the industrial world. We talked, I think, Michael, you talked about EV, and EV having green infrastructure or green energy to drive the EV chargers. But the question in India, at least, and Michael, y'all in Germany are way ahead, is that what comes first, the charger or the car? And the question is, or the infrastructure. So I can go out there and invest lots of capital to build the infrastructure, but how do I get a return on this capital till such time that the cars come in? So that's going to be part of a challenge. And so we need innovative business models to solve this chicken and egg problem that we're going to have. 4th is returns on capital. And we are seeing that in the renewable space also, because at some point, if returns come down to the point, this whole thing about sustainability is going to get impacted as well. So I think those are some of the points we have. The last point I'll just say, Nitin, is I think it's fabulous to see industries now willing to source wind and solar energy directly from consumers to sort of reduce not only their cost of energy, but also go towards green. And Michael, it was fantastic to hear what you were saying, that BMW is now looking not only at your tier 1 suppliers, but tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. And if people at the top of the pecking order like BMW can help the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers move their needle along on the sustainability side, that would make a big impact globally in the world of sustainability and air pollution. Back to you, Nitin.
Great, thanks very much, TP. We're out of time, but Michael and Siddharth and Tarun, maybe as a rapid fire, perhaps you could just go as we go around the table. What's one thing that one help, one support, one intervention that forums such as the CEO Forum or CII can come and help to really sort of accelerate some of the change that you've been talking about? So, Michael, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Nitin. In a rapid fire, I heard a lot about supporting initiative, regulation, and also bring it to your own company through the discussion that you have in the forum. But sometimes it's an opportunity for common business that helps to push sustainability. So, for example, when energy business work with people who have charging station and then make them available to everyone through roaming, that might be some kind of business. It's just an example that is often happening in many countries. So there are some opportunities in sustainability, and with a little push from such organization, might be brought further forward. That would be my point.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Siddharth, what are your thoughts? So you're on mute, Siddharth.
Yeah, my observation has been in the last few months with emissions trading that the final consumer of the emissions trading is actually the industry. And we spend a lot of time with the regulators. So I mean that I think a forum like this, what it can help is in basically getting the final consumer of this concept, the final consumer of this scheme right in front of our face, because I don't think that whether it's the challenges or whether it's the positive outcomes of doing something like emissions trading schemes are fully understood by the industry itself, because finally that's the consumer. They have to demand for it. If they don't demand for it, I mean that what will the regulators do? The regulators are more concerned about what are the changes in the regulations that we have to do in case we need to bring ETS into the market. But then that's about it. I mean, that how do we raise the awareness? How do we make people understand? I think that's really the role of this forum. I think really as simple as that.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And Tarun, you get the last word. So how do we help entrepreneurs? You already have an offer on the table from Neera, but what else could we do?
It's very simple. Buy our products and please talk about it.
Oh, well done. That is as rapid fire as you can get. Well, team, thank you very much for bearing with me, and apologies for running over by a few minutes. But I hope everybody you've enjoyed what I think was an incredibly engaging session, and I think all of our panelists